with Dr. Iris Freelander, and we'd like to talk to you today about having more conscious faith. You know, all of us need to have a level of faith in our lives, and we need to have a conscious awareness of the faith that we do exhibit and the faith that does sustain us in our lives. I think a lot of people don't really give a lot of thought to their consciousness or their conscious awareness, do they, Iris?
That's true. They don't. I remember an aunt of mine once said, I said, "What were you thinking?" And she said, "Oh, several things." And I thought, even though I was very young, I thought at the time, well, that's strange. How can you think of several things at once and get any good out of it? But that seems to be quite prevalent. And we all do it. I'm sure I do it too. But when we stay one-pointed, or when we keep our consciousness in present time, then we have more benefit from our thoughts. And our thoughts are creative. So sometimes when our thoughts are disheveled, then we're creating chaos instead of serenity.
Yeah, very important concept and idea to share with our viewers, because as our minds operate, our interpretation or view of the world is being filtered by that dynamic of mind. And so often in counseling and also in our spiritual work, people will say that they just seem so confused, or they seem so disorganized, or they seem so behind, or they seem something. And it really has to do with the manner in which their mind is operating. And also, I think we need to spend a little time talking about this concept and idea of being in the present moment, because as we talk about conscious faith and using faith in a conscious way to be productive and to impact our lives in a positive and affirmative way, we need to be in the present moment, don't we?
Yes, we do. And when we are, if we'll just watch our own actions and our thoughts and the results, we'll see that we're far more productive. And there's times when we can just let our minds wander, and we don't have to just be one-pointed totally all the time, because a little wool gathering is good for the soul. And I think children who daydream are happy and creative, more so than the average. But on the other hand, just on a day-to-day living, as we go about our chores or our work or whatever it is we're doing that's productive, then we're far more productive if we can keep our consciousness in present time.
So often our minds wander into the future and into the past. And often when we have difficulties or challenges in life, our minds will wander back and forth from past experiences, so that we're comparing this experience to something that's happened in the past, or we have anticipation about the experience. So one example would be if someone loses a job, for instance. Very often, if someone loses their job, not of their own choice, and they're upset about it, they begin to look at the future in a very negative way, and their mind begins to operate thinking, well, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to meet my obligations? Am I going to find a job? Or in some cases, people's minds begin to operate with the consciousness that I won't find another job. I won't be able to pay my rent. I'm going to lose my house. I'm not going to be able to feed the children. I won't meet my car payment, and all of those things. And what we know about consciousness and the creative power of mind is what? That creates after its own kind, doesn't it? And so often our thoughts become those self-fulfilling prophecies, not because they're prophecies, but because of the creative dynamic of our mind. And the same is true when we look into the past, because often, again, if someone had lost a job, for instance, it wouldn't be uncommon for people to be able to identify with their family situations in the past when someone near or dear to them has lost a job, or perhaps they have. And so the identification comes to that future potential or that retrospective look, when in fact the loss of this job is a uniquely different experience, and where we are at that point in time, or where that person is at that point in time, is completely different than where the one in the past or the anticipation of the future would be.
Yes, it's interesting too that the astrological sign does make a difference in people. I'm thinking of my younger son, who when he was in first grade, the teacher said he was going to be held back if he didn't do better. So I told him that, what his teacher had said, and he said, "Oh, good, I'll have all new friends." And that seemed to be his idea. And yet there are children who would have been devastated at the very idea of that. So And I'm thinking of the various astrological signs, and two, it's temperament, but that makes a difference too. That makes a difference in the temperament of the person. So it's interesting to see the types of people who panic, and then those who just flow with whatever happens. And perhaps it isn't the sign, but it's a wonderful thing to be able to accept in that way what life brings us, and then we are able to be more productive and to get on with our lives regardless of what happens. And that person is far more happy, but sometimes that kind of person gets ulcers because they hold it all within. So we just have to know ourselves. Know thyself and thou knowest all.
And that's what our program and what metaphysical New Thought teaching is all about, knowing ourselves more completely and more fully, and understanding the dynamic of how it is we act and react, how we think, and what our relationship is to those around us, to the world, and to that which is divine, and to the presence and power of God. So when we put all that together, one of the great aspects of our faith tradition and also our self-help programs that we are involved in are really looking at ourselves and looking at our ability to deal with circumstances and situations. And I think it's important for us always to say that circumstances and situations, good and bad, positive and negative, visit us all. And so it doesn't matter how good we are, and it doesn't matter what our faith tradition is, and it doesn't matter what it is we believe about ourselves. There are going to be circumstances and situations that are going to come into our lives that are going to bring us happy experiences, and there are others that are going to challenge us. And what we're talking about is having a conscious awareness and a more conscious faith to be able to deal with those situations in a positive and affirmative way. Not that we're going to make them go away, but that we're going to make the negative aspects of those experiences go away. And going back to the job, if someone loses a job, it really is a time of reevaluation of one's life, looking at alternatives. And one of the things that we say so often is that it's wonderful that you can lose your job because you have the opportunity to go find another one. And just like your son, it's an opportunity to have a new avenue and a new way of expressing life in work. Now, you may not want to lose your job, and you may not have chosen to do that, but if it's done, it's done. And that's an important aspect, that wherever we are in life is where we are. And it's all right to feel however we feel. If we can be depressed, we can be sad, we can be happy, we can be dejected. But the key is not to remain in that, and to draw upon this issue of faith that we're going to move into and talking about, and know that there is an infinite knowledge, an infinite source and resource within every one of us that's going to guide us and direct us in the way that we should go. And that's that consciousness of faith, and allowing that dynamic to operate within our lives. For some people, it's a very religious aspect or a spiritual aspect. For some people, it doesn't have much to do with religion or spiritual dimensions. And that's perfectly all right, because faith doesn't have to be religious or spiritual, because it is a truth, and it's a dynamic that simply works. But having faith in ourselves, having faith in the universe, having faith in the world, having faith in the people around us, having faith in life itself is key to our happiness and our empowerment.
Yes, and then if we have faith, we know that our faith will be justified, and it is. So whatsoever we think, then it happens. And so, as we know that our faith will be justified, we're able to face any adversity and face it calmly, and just in the knowing that it will be justified, we can go on and know that better things are around the corner, and better things very usually are. And it's a dichotomy, isn't it? The way we live our lives is truly a dichotomy. We have faith, and yet we don't. And we have knowledge, and yet we don't use it. It's strange.
It's a strange experience,
Yes.
life, and it's a mystery.
Yes.
And part of the mystery is that we don't need to know.
Yeah.
But so often we want to know, and especially our Western mind wants us to know. And our Western theology has all of the answers and can tell us what happens and why it happens and where God is in this and where the universe is. And in fact, The truth is that very few, if any of us, know all of it. None of us know all of the facts, but we can have faith in the fact that we can be guided, we can be directed, we can be empowered, we can be strengthened, and we can deal with circumstances and situations. And therein lies the way out. But the way out is not to analyze and to believe that we know all of the answers, but instead to be open that we can be guided and directed in the way that we should go. And that's always, I think, when we're faced with difficult times or challenges or adversity, that's always the thing to do, is to know with an inner knowing that no matter what the appearance, no matter what the experience, no matter what has happened, no matter where we are, that we can be moved, guided, and directed to a positive and affirmative place, and we will come out of this experience, and we will not only go through it, as we say so often, not only go through it, but we'll grow through it. And it's that growth process that comes from our drawing upon our inner faith. And again, that can be spiritual, or it can simply be the reality of a presence within us that will guide us and direct us.
Well, and I think too, in order to have that faith in the first place, we have to have come to terms with life and come to terms with a divine creator, or whatever our religion, we come to terms with that and know that we're divinely guided, we're divinely inspired, and we're divinely strengthened. And also that before we come in to each earth life, we have like a sacred contract, and we have that contract knowing inside ourselves what we're to accomplish for that lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And so then as we live the life and fulfill our sacred contract, then as we go through life, we're comfortable with that. And other people might think, well, we're in dire straits and that's a terrible, terrible existence. We might be very comfortable living whatever it is we've contracted to accomplish and achieve. But as we live it, then truly, then we're not upset, and we can be serene in the face of adversity.
Mm-hmm. And it's an important concept, and a concept that all people can identify with, going through the broad spectrum of faith traditions, and also even people without faith, because we have a strong inner knowing and a strong inner knowledge and awareness of the fact that we have purpose. Now, we may deny that, we may question it, or we may believe that we don't have a purpose, but in fact, deep down within our deepest inner being, we know that we have a purpose, and we're here to fulfill that purpose. And that purpose, in many instances, is to experience those very things that we want to avoid. Because experiencing those very things that we want to avoid brings us to the point of completion in the process of life and what we are here to do and to accomplish.
Yes, but those people who take time to be calm, to meditate, to just be at one with Creator God, well, they are more strong in the storms of life, and so because as they commune with God, then they're strengthened, and they have a fixity of purpose. So that fixity of purpose helps that one to get through the bad times and go over the shoals of trouble, so that they would then be happy when they've accomplished something that's been very, very difficult, or live through a tragedy in their family. And we know that very often an entire family will plan what they're to have accomplished before they ever come in to earth life existence. And so that's pretty remarkable, isn't it?
It's a divine plan.
Yes.
And life is operating in a divine fashion, and it's operating in exactly the way that it ought to. And we need to understand that and realize it. And we need to also know that life is going to bring us all of these wonderful opportunities, and sometimes the most painful experiences are the best opportunities of our lives disguised.
Yes. A friend of mine said last week that I just like to be busy doing things, and she said, I like to accomplish a lot. I like to stay busy. And so she had to go to an acupuncturist because her hip was giving her a problem. And the acupuncturist said to her, "Why do you work so hard?" And so it really took her back. So she made a special point to call and say the acupuncturist had said the same thing I had, only in a different way. And so sometimes we're so busy running that we don't get those messages. So we need to slow down enough to hear what life is offering us, and to hear where we're headed in this earth life. Isn't that true?
Absolutely, and we need to be more conscious, which is exactly what we're talking about, and being conscious of the circumstance and situation, and also conscious of this magnificent reservoir of faith that's available to each and every one of us. And we'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature so that you can continue to study the concepts and ideas that we're sharing.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807.
We do need to talk, I guess, in the second half of the program about the importance of having faith in ourselves, don't we? You know, so often, especially in religious circles, there's such negativity about this idea that we are responsible for ourselves. In some way, people of different faiths, and especially Western faith, believe that if you don't rely solely upon God, and of course, we're not talking about not relying upon God when we rely upon ourselves, but we are given by God, we are given by the Creator the ability and the knowledge to guide and direct ourselves through our inner knowing. And so we really have to be responsible for ourselves, don't we?
Yes, indeed, we do. And we need to claim that responsibility joyously and not begrudgingly. And one way to do that is to always remember, and we say in our church very often, God and I are one. And so is to remember that the truth of that. It wouldn't matter what religion we have, or if we don't profess to have a religion, then to know that we are at one with divine Creator. And everything has to have been created, so there must be a divine Creator. So when we're at one with that energy, then it makes a difference in our lives. It makes a difference in how we solve our problems. It makes a difference in how we retain our sanity when we go through the problems of life. And everyone goes through some problems. I read something once that a hangnail on one's finger might cause greater consternation than to realize that 1,000 people are killed in a war in another country. So we have to keep our perspective, and everything is of a specific perspective, isn't it?
It is. It has to do with our perspective and view of the circumstance and the situation, and it impacts us differently. We've often, in talks I've given, have shared the idea and the concept that if we all exchanged our problems in life, they wouldn't have at all the same value, because they're personal to us, and the challenges are personal to us, because the circumstance is unique to us, the life is unique to us, and so that which is important to us or painful to us is perhaps only an insignificant discomfort to someone else, or maybe not important at all. So we have to put things in perspective and also understand that things are changing constantly, and that all of the things and circumstances that come into our life are transient. Life itself is transient. But we also need, and as we build this conscious faith, more conscious faith, we need to understand, and you talked a few moments ago about prayer and meditation, and whatever an individual's faith tradition is, that communion with the presence and the power of God is so important. But we need to be cautious about the fact that we don't spend a lot of time pleading with God to change, as though this infinite intelligence and this divine Creator changes his or her, but his feeling about us as time goes on. And the one thing that we teach so clearly is that the will of God and the presence of God and the relationship that we have with God is constant. It never changes. God doesn't like us one moment and dislike us the next. And we don't have to change God's mind about anything. But what we do need to do is to change our mind about the circumstance and situation, change our mind about our ability to deal with the circumstance and situation, and change us and not even the circumstance. Because as we are able to change us, then we become really demonstrators of this conscious faith in life and in our ability to deal with circumstances and situations. God is going to give us every resource, and has already given us every resource that we need. You know, one of the things that is said often that God finished in Genesis after the creation, and He's left it to us. And that's absolutely true. God's feeling about us has not changed, and we need to understand that. So often we spend a lot of time pleading with God to change His mind about us and believe that that will change the circumstance. And that's not faith at all. That has to do with a little misconception of the relationship between God and ourselves, which is not a little thing at all, because for most of us, that relationship, or for many of us, that relationship doesn't exist. And we believe that God's out here and we're trying to find Him, or we're trying to get Him to come into our lives, when in fact, as you said a few moments ago, we believe firmly that God and we are one. And we're never separated. And if there's a separation that takes place, it's because we choose not to claim the reality of the presence and power, and thereby do not draw upon it as a resource when we need it.
Yes, and we can think of various points. One, God is love. And if God is indeed love, then we can see all of life in a different viewpoint when we look at it from those eyes. And we can also know that God gave us free choice, free will, and as He gave us free will, we make our own choices, and God doesn't send calamity on us. We create that calamity through lifetime after lifetime of our own actions. But what seems to be a calamity very often will later be seen as something very wonderful and a turning point for the better. So we need to always remember that, and not to be, and when we do always remember that, then we don't get bogged down in trouble and strife and travail, because we know that there's a purpose, a reason for this. There's a reason for whatever it is we're experiencing. And as we know that in our hearts, then we react in a different way than if we're terribly despondent. So, and that's all part of knowing that God is love, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, it's like the old saying of let go and let God, and we say that's an incomplete statement, that we need to let go and let God guide us and direct us in the way that we should go, because we need to do it. And God will empower us and guide us. And so that's, when we fold our hands and say, well, I'm going to turn it over to God, and then we don't want to get up and do anything, going back to the person that's lost the job. If you just say, I've lost my job and now I'm going to allow God to open the door to do something wonderful in my life, and you sit there and wait for God, you'll probably be unemployed for a long time, because the reality is that God has empowered us and enabled us with the ability to do things in life. And so what we need is to let go and let God guide us and direct us, and then get up and go to work. And get up and change our relationships, get up and improve the way that our life exists with other people, and change things because of who we are and because of the strength of faith that we already have, that is already present in us. Not something that we're seeking, but something that's already present, already in our lives, but not fully manifest.
Yes, and when we do that, then we're our own person. And they say, I'm my own man. Well, we're our own person. And we then make our decisions according to the brain that God gave us, the brain that we've brought through for this specific lifetime. And we take responsibility for ourselves. And the self-responsibility is really the bottom line throughout our lifetimes. Even for small children, self-responsibility is the bottom line. And all through life it is. And wouldn't it be a tragedy if we didn't assume self-responsibility? Because it would mean that we're expecting God to do everything for us. And as you said, the person who just sits with folded hands, well, that's all they're going to have are folded hands. They're not going to have those hands accomplishing anything, because we have to gain our own initiative. And it's through faith and through perseverance that we then gain that initiative and follow through on it. And as we follow through on it, then we have accomplished something in life, and we are accomplishing what God sent us to earth to do. And actually, to me, our mission in life is to grow back to God, to grow back to being God-like. And that might seem to some people to be very presumptive. Well, it isn't. It's no more presumptive than the fact that we're here in these bodies and living a life and able to make decisions and choices and so forth. So When we are use self-responsibility, have faith in God and know that our faith will be justified, and then use that initiative the way that we think is best. If we're meditating and looking to divine inspiration, then we're going to make the right choices. And there are no wrong choices. I've heard you say that in your sermons. There's no wrong choices. It's just some choice. One choice will have one finality, and another choice will have another.
Mm-hmm. And those choices determine the turns of our life, but not the ultimate outcome of our life.
Exactly.
And the ultimate outcome of our life is that we're all going to see very clearly what it is we missed in this experience, and we'll get an opportunity to deal with it at some later time. But it's much more wonderful and empowering if we can deal with it now. And I'm thinking about the kind of Christian story that is told about World War II, where there was a statue in Europe in front of the church of the blessing Christ, and his hands were blown off, and someone had hung a sign around the neck of the statue saying, "I have no hands and arms but yours." And so this idea that God is going to do everything for us is really not what we need to be about. We need to be about doing the things ourselves and even doing divine things. And I think from a spiritual standpoint, for those who are scripturally oriented, and we're not strongly so from a literal standpoint, we certainly are not, but I think that certainly Western theology is clear on the fact that even in Christ's life, and certainly Paul's interpretation and those around him, the followers of Christ, made it clear that we were to become like him, and he made it clear that we were to become like him, and that we would do what he did, and as we say so often, even more. And so if that's the case, then we are constantly becoming more empowered, more dynamic, more divine, and more infinite in our own being. And that gives us a very strong sense of conscious faith to be able to deal with anything, doesn't it?
Yes, because we're fulfilling our destiny on the planet according to divine plan, and we've helped to formulate the divine plan. And as we live that, then we are fulfilling that, and then we're at peace. And regardless of what we have to do or what we are not allowed to do, then we're still at peace because we know that we're fulfilling what we came to accomplish.
Absolutely. Beautifully put. A wonderful way to bring a close to this program, because there is a divine plan, and we are in the midst of that divine plan, and conscious faith can allow you to live out the divine plan that you came into this life experience to know more fully, and that is who and what you are as a perfect and whole child of God. And we hope that the information we shared with you has been useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing New Thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.